Hello guys, this is part 127 of ASP.NET video tutorial. In this video, we will discuss about different ways that are available to cache application data, removing an item from cache, similarities and differences between cache and application state variable. Let me show this slide you. Let me show this precisely. In part 126, of ASP.NET video tutorial, we discuss about caching application data using direct assignment. So if you remember, we have this method So if you remember, where is my Visual Studio? Okay. So if you remember, we have this method called get products data, this one, which executes this stored procedure retrieve the product from database and return them as a data set. And here in the button click event, we invoke that method. And then whatever data set that is returned by this method, is then stored in this variable. Which is then cached using this product data key. Which is then cached using this products data key. So here we are storing this data set. In cache using direct assignment. Now, apart from caching data, using direct assignment, there are other options as well. We can either use cache objects insert method, as you can see here, cache objects insert method, or add method. Let's look at using each of them. So instead of using the direct assignment, I want to use cache objects insert method. So using instead of using the direct assignment, I want to use cache objects insert method to cache application data. And to do that, so cache dot insert, and to do that, so cache dot insert. So I am using this method, and look at it. The moment I open this bracket, and look at this, look at it. The moment I open this bracket, there are 5 overloaded versions, as you can see here. And obviously the simplest of these 5 overloaded version is this method. Is this method, which expects the cache key, and the value that we want to store. Okay, so there are several other overloaded version as well. So there are several other overloaded versions as well. So this second version is here. Apart from key value, it also expects a cache dependency. So we will talk about cache dependency in a later video sessions. Basically, cache dependency means, obviously, when you have a data that is stored in the cache, if it is dependent on a data source, and if the data in that source changes, I want to obviously refresh the data that is present in my cache key, my cache. Okay, so I can do that using this cache dependency object. We will talk about this in a later video sessions. And similarly, I have several other overloaded version as well, which takes different parameters. Here in this cache, in this case, absolute expirations and sliding expirations. Again, we can set expiration date for a cache object. We will talk about that also in a later video session. So we will discuss about using all these different overloaded version in a later video session. But for now, let's use this simple version, which expects just the key and value. So here the key is going to be the same as products data, and the value, look at this, very important, the data type of the value that we want to cache is object. Means, let me copy this. and values. So here the key is going to be the same as products data, and the value, look at this is very important. The data type of the value that we want to cache is object, meaning you can store anything in the cache object. Okay, here I want to store data set, so I specify ds. I save that. I save that and run my application. So let me save this and run my application. Obviously, here we have not changed the functionality in any way. It is just that instead of using direct assignment, okay, obviously here we have not changed the functionality in any way. It is just that instead of using direct assignment to store, the data set in the cache object, we are using the cache object's insert method. And if you remember, here we have this sp get products method, means where go to the SQL Server Management Studio. Here we have this sp get method. Where is the sp get method? Here, sp get products method, which basically is blocking the execution of the stored procedure for 5 seconds. Yeah. Instead of that, I am going to update that to 1 second just to save time. Okay, let me change it to 1. Okay, and execute this. So obviously now when I click that, the data should be returned in less than a second. So obviously now when I click that, the data should be returned in less than a second, and you can see that it took 1 second, and it loaded the data from database, I click this again. We get the data set from cache object, and obviously 0 second load time there. Okay, all right. So we have just seen how to use the cache objects insert method. Now let's see how to use the other option. Which is using the cache objects method. So now let's see how to use the other option, which is using the cache objects add method. So cache.add. So go to the Visual Studio. So cache dot add cache dot add. Now look at this cache objects add method does not have any overloads, meaning we have to supply values for all these parameter. Okay. Now obviously the first parameter is the key. In our case, the key is going to be products data. So let's copy. And specify the key there. So let's copy. And specify there. What is happening? And specify there. And then the next parameter is obviously the value. The next parameter is obviously the value. The value is again data set. And look at the third parameter. Again data set. And look at the third parameter, cache dependency. Look at the third parameter, cache dependencies. For now, let me just pass null. For now. Let me just pass null for cache dependency, and then we have to specify absolute expiration. And then we have to specify absolute expirations. And now if you don't want to specify absolute expiration, look at here. What it say. You can specify if you are using sliding expiration. The absolute expirations parameter must be system.web.caching.cache.no absolute expiration. Okay. Now I don't want to specify any absolute or sliding expiration. So for this parameter, for now, I'm going to say no absolute expiration. Let's use that system.web.caching on top. So let's use that system.web.caching on top. Where? Go up. System.web dot caching. System.web.caching on top, so that we don't have to type the entire fully qualified namespace every time. So system.web.caching. So here we need to specify no sliding expiration. which is present in the class, in the cache class. Which is present in the cache class. So cache class dot no absolute expiration. So cache class dot no absolute expiration here, and then we need to specify no sliding expiration, and then we need to specify no sliding expiration. Cache.add method. Because I don't want to, so we need to specify no sliding expiration, because I don't want to specify any sliding expirations at the minute. So now no sliding expiration, and cache item priority, and cache item priority, priority. Dot default. And cache item priority, we will talk about cache item priority in a later video session as well. So for now I am going to specify cache item priority dot default, and then finally cache item removed callback, and then finally cache item removed callback delegate. Now for this, at the moment I am going to pass null. Okay. So if you look at this method, again we are simply caching here. Again we are simply caching here the data set. Again we are simply caching here the data set using this products data, products data. All the other parameter I have set them to their defaults. Now, so this line again is equivalent to, so now this line again is equivalent to any of these, okay. So obviously now if I run this, behavior is not going to change in any way, except that now we are using cache object add method. Okay. So let me run this, save it, and close this. Now run. I click this. Okay, so behavior is the same. All right. Another important thing is that another important thing is that we need to be extremely cautious. We need to be extremely cautious when dealing with the cache keys. Assigning a value to a cache key that is already being used while silently override the existing value without any warning whatsoever. Meaning, let's say, for example, in the page load event, I'm trying to store an item in the cache. I'm trying to store an item in the cache. Let's say in page load, I am setting cache of my key. Is equal to value 1. And when I click the button, let's actually comment this here. Let's actually comment this here. Let's actually comment this here. Okay, let's actually comment this here, the button click event for the time being. Okay, let's say I need to also means okay, I need also to comment this here. Okay, let's say in the button click, Let's say in the button click event, I am just changing that cache of my key to value 2. I am just changing that cache of my key to value 2. So cache of my key cache of my key is equal to value 2. Now look at this in the page load event, which happens before button click. You are setting that key to value 1. You are setting key to value 1. And in the button click event, you are changing it to value 2. In this sense, you are assigning a different value to that key. So what happens to value 1? It gets silently overwritten. So if that is your intention, then that is fine. But if it happens unintentionally or accidentally, then you will lose the value that is already present in the key. So just be a little cautious when dealing with these cache key. Obviously, now when we say obviously now when we say lbl message.text is equal to cache of my key dot to string. So what will happen, instead of value 1, value 2 will be displayed in that label. So lbl message dot text is equal to cache of my key dot to string. So what will happen? Instead of value 1, value 2 will be displayed in the label. Because that is, let me run this now, save this. So run this. click this. So value 2, because that value 1 will be silently overwritten, because that will be silently overwritten. Value 1 will be silently overwritten. Okay, all right. So let's get rid of this. So let's get rid of this. And let's uncomment this code. Uncomment this code and let's get rid of this line. Means first of all we need to get rid of these lines and the bottom line. And uncomment this all. All right. All right. And to remove an item from cache, and to remove an item from cache explicitly. So if we want to remove the cached item explicitly, we can use cache objects remove method. We can use cache objects remove method. So obviously if I want to remove an item with key my key, I simply say cache dot remove. Let's say for example on the web form, let's have another button here, and obviously when I click that button, so let's go to the Visual Studio. And let's have another button here. I need to have this button, not here. Come on. Okay. So let's have another button here, and obviously when I click that button, so when I click that button, I want to remove the cache object. So when I click the button, I want to remove the cache object. So cache dot remove. So cache dot remove. So I want to remove the cache object. So cache dot remove, and look at that. We need to specify the cache item key. And look at that. We need to specify the cache item key that we want to remove. In this case, I want to remove the item with key products data. So I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to copy that. And specify it here. Okay, and then as soon as I remove that, I want to display the message in the label stating cache item is now removed. So the cached item is now removed. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this now. Save this and run it. Okay, now save this and run it. When the web form loads up, and then when we click that button, we should be able to retrieve data from database and load it in the grid view control as well. Cache it. I click the button again. I get from the cache. I click this button again. We retrieve rows from database. I click this again. I get from the cache. So when I click this button, what should happen? So when I click this button, what should happen? The cache item should be removed. The cache item should be removed. Let's click that button and see what is going to happen. Look at this. The cache item is removed. So go here and click this. Look at this. The cache item is now removed, but then look at the data. I have not lost the data. So where is this data coming from? Now this is not coming from cache. This is not coming from database. This data is actually maintained on the web form, because we have a view state enabled for this grid view control by default. A view state enabled for this grid view control by default. So if we disable the view state for the grid view control using enable view state property, so there is enable view state property. So go to the Visual Studio and get to the property of this grid view control. Where is the view state? Enable view state. Where is the enable view state? Here it is. Now disable it, setting it to false. So the property which is turned on, I am going to set that to false. And let's go ahead and run this now. So now since I have disabled view state, look at it. Save this. And run it again. Since I have disabled view state, look at it, that when I say get product data, obviously we get the data from the database. You get the data from the database. Now I click it again. 4 rows retrieved from cache. 4 rows retrieved from cache. Now I am going to remove the item from cache. Look at that, the cache item is now removed as soon as web form posted back. Click this. The cache item is removed, and then since we don't have view state enabled for the grid view control, we don't have the data there anymore. Now if we want to remove the item, if we want to remove the item from cache explicitly, we use remove method. But remember, an item may be removed automatically from cache. An item may be removed automatically from cache when any of the following conditions are true. When any of the following conditions are true. Now the cache item can have an expiry. Now the cached item can have an expiry. We can set an expiry date and time. Now the cached item can have an expiry. We can set an expiry date and time on the cached object, and if the cached item has expired, then obviously it will be automatically removed by ASP.NET. Okay. On the other hand, cache item may also be automatically removed if system or the web server is running low on memory and the cache is full, and the cache is full. So web server will come around and then remove the items from cache. Okay, so again that will happen automatically. If the web server is running low on memory, now we can also set a cache dependency. Now we can also set a cache dependency. We will talking about that in a later video session. So when there is a cache dependency established and then the item that the cache object is dependent on has changed, obviously we need to refresh that cache, or we can specify what to do. So basically when the cache dependency has changed, even in those circumstances the cache item may be removed automatically. But then if you want to remove the cache, object explicitly, we use remove method. In a way, cache object is actually similar to cache object is actually similar to application state. In fact, this is a common interview question as well. What is this similarity between application state variables and cache objects? Basically the scope. Both of them are global, which means they are available anywhere within the application, within the web application. For example, I have stored here on the button click event. So go to the Visual Studio. So for example, I have stored here on the button click event, we are storing this item. Products data within cache. Not only on web form 1, in any of the web form throughout your entire web application, this cache data, cache data will be available. So basically the accessibility is global at application level, just like application state variables. Okay, now what is different between them? Items stored in cache can have expiry, whereas items stored in application state will never expire. So the cache object give us some flexibility. You can specify expiration time, but whereas the application state variable, we cannot do that. So those are the similarities and differences between cache and application state variable. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.